For this first session, what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at some basic music theory. Now, you may be wondering why a DVD based on creating dance music bass lines is starting with some music theory, and the reason for that is that if you want to write a bass line that works, it doesn't matter what the genre, you have to have at least some knowledge of the theory behind different keys, the different modes, and the notes that these can make available to us. Now, before we even start here, I must stress that this is only a quick introduction to music theory to explain the concept of scales, because, well, quite simply, you have to comprehend them if you want to write a bass line. So it's not a full explanation of all the aspects of music theory. I'm not going to take time out to discuss harmony or relative minors, because that's something that would require a couple of DVDs to themselves, and it may be something that we'll look at in the future. For now, all we want to do is concentrate on bass lines, so we're just going to look at the basics of music theory now. As you can see here, I've got a piano keyboard laid out on the Jupiter 8V. I suspect most of you are aware of the names of each of the keys, but if you're not, I'm just going to give a quick refresher here. We start from C. We have C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, and then we go back around to C. Now, as you can no doubt see there, there's 12 notes there, and those 12 notes go to make up the chromatic scale. And this chromatic scale is repeated up the keyboard each time an octave higher. Now, we can easily identify where the C is on a keyboard by looking at the two sharps. The C always sits there. So we'd have a C there, then an octave higher, we've got a C there. An octave higher, we have a C there. An octave higher, we have a C there. An octave higher, we have a C there. And if the keyboard continued on, we would have two sharps there, and that would be our final one. For the examples that we're going to do here, we're going to start from our middle C. We're going to start from there, which is basically called middle C because, well, it's sat in the middle of the keyboard, really. Now, as I've mentioned, we have a total of 12 notes, and what happens is these 12 notes make up what's known as the musical chromatic scale. In a way, we could say that this is our musical alphabet. It basically consists of all the notes that are available to us, and from these notes we can select 7 of them to create a musical scale. Now, in some respects, that could be considered like our alphabet. We don't use all the letters in the alphabet to make a single word. Instead, what it does basically is the alphabet says, here's a number of letters, pick some of these to make a word. And that's exactly the same with music. The chromatic scale says, here's the 12 notes in music, pick out 7 of these to make a scale. Now, to understand how we create a musical scale, what we need to do is we first need to look at the concept of intervals, semitones, and tones. Now, what we'll do is we'll jump back to this keyboard. And looking at it, we can say, well, we've got a C there. Now, straight after C, we have a C sharp. Now, that interval there is known as a semitone. And C sharp to D, again, is a semitone. D to D sharp, that's a semitone. E to F is a semitone because obviously we have no sharp key there, so it's the next note along a semitone. F to F sharp is a semitone, and we can continue up the keyboard counting the semitones. Now, one thing with music is if we add 2 semitones together, we come up with a tone. So what we can do is say, well, C and C sharp together equals a tone. So a tone away from C would be D, and again a tone away from D would be E, and a tone away from E would be F sharp. Again, remember we have no sharp there, so to go a tone, we add 2 semitones together. Now, that is an incredibly important aspect to graphs. You must understand semitones and tones because music is built on that fundamental understanding. So what we're going to do is we'll jump right back down to C again, and what we're going to do is we're going to make a major scale. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of the major scale. It's possibly the most used scale in music, and while it is used in some dance music records, particularly euphoric trance, around 95% of pop music records use this scale, and it is an important scale to understand. Now, the major scale is built on the following theorem: tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So that means that if we would start counting from C, our first one is a tone, so that would be D. Then we have another tone, which takes us to E. Then it's a semitone, which takes us to F. Then we have a tone, which takes us to G. Then we have another tone, which takes us to A. Then another tone, which takes us to B. And finally a semitone, which takes us to C. So from that, what we can say is that the C major scale, because we started counting from C, consists of C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and finally back round to C. Now, there's 2 things that you've got to pay attention to there. The first is that the C major scale doesn't have any sharps in it. There's no black keys in that whatsoever. It's based totally around the white notes and the white notes only. Secondly, by using that theorem, we've been given a number of notes, a total of 7 notes that will all work together. Now, when I say that, I mean that they'll all sound harmonious with one another. No matter what order we play them in or what we write, provided we only use these 7 notes to create everything from the bass to the lead to the harmony to the strings, it'll all fit together and sound harmonious together. Nothing will sound out of tune. And as I mentioned, since we started counting from C, we're writing in the key of C. Now, keys are important for reasons that we'll look at later in this session, but for the moment, all you need to know is that we started counting from C. That means we're writing in C. We're writing in the key of C, and we're using the major theorem, the major tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So that means we're writing in C major. Now, we can apply that exact same theorem to every key, every note available to us in the scale, in our chromatic scale. So what we can do is say, well, let's start counting from D rather than C. So again, our theorem: tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So a tone up from D is E. A tone up from E is F sharp. A semitone from F sharp is G. A tone from G is A. A tone from A is B. A tone from B is C sharp. And then a semitone brings us back round to D. So what we can say there is that our D major scale consists of the notes D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. Now, just as with the C major scale, what the D major scale does is give us a number of notes that will all work together. These 7 notes will all be harmonious with one another, no matter what order we put them in, what we write, what we play, provided we only use these 7 notes in D major to create everything from the harmony to the bass to the lead, the strings, everything. It'll all fit together and sound well. And as before, when we counted from C, this time we counted from D, therefore we're writing in the key of D major. Now, that applies to every key in the chromatic scale, every note in the chromatic scale. We could start counting from E if we wanted to, and we'd use the same theorem, E, which is a tone, which would be F sharp, and we'd count up the same way, and that will give us all the scales, and we could say that we'll get 12 major scales out of the chromatic scale. Now, keys are important because if you choose to use a vocalist in your music, you have to ensure that the music will suit their key. You'll find that all vocalists have a specific key range, and if you write your music out of their key, they're not going to be able to sing along to it. Plus, if you bring a musician in, whether it's a guitarist, a bassist, or whatever, the first thing they're probably going to ask you is what key is your music in, and that's so they know exactly what notes they have available to play with, because if they know the key, they can pluck away any of the 7 notes that fit in that key and it will fit with your music. So basically, that's how we create the major scale in any of the keys. Obviously, this applies to every note in the scale, as I've said. Whichever note you start counting from, provided you use our theorem of tone, tone, semitone, and so forth, you'll be able to determine the notes that will make up the key of your choice in the major scale. Of course, if you can't be bothered doing that, have a look at the DVD pamphlet that came with this DVD, because it does contain a list of all the notes available in each key in the major scale, and it will shortcut it rather than having to sit there going, well, D to semitone, tone, so on. So what we'll do there is we'll bring this session to an end and we'll move on to the next. And what we're going to do in the next session is we're going to go a little further and we're going to start looking at different musical modes. So let's move on to that.